Right, I guess we can start. I think you're very lucky today. I'm a journalist in cybersecurity. I often get the information last when the investigation is over and there is a seizure of prohibited illegal substances. I rarely get information very early in the process. But today, we are very lucky to have someone who really knows what's happening, that will give us a real concrete look at what's happening on the ground in terms of cybercrime and cryptocurrencies. We have Colonel Florent Manet with us. I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon and to be able to talk about what we do within the Gendarmerie. I'm currently leading a department for the Ministry of the Interior in the cyberspace for all departments of our Interior Ministry. We work in cooperation, very often in partnerships with other public services, customs, for example, just to give one example. The department I lead is really summed up in two main tasks. And really what we have in common is digital data. The first topic I want to talk about is the legal investigation looking at money laundering using crypto assets for illegally acquired money. This is the core of my presentation. And the second task is working on digital data from collection on any type of support, servers, PCs, smartphones, and then work on how we deal with that data, how we process it, and how we make it understandable for inquirers, investigators. So it's a world of expertise with a number of labs, and together they look at several examples of use cases. So within this expertise, digital expertise center that I lead, we really had to work on new ways of deciphering, and we've developed skills and know-how, and this is something that we use for our investigations on cryptocurrencies, and I will give you examples. It's the first example that I could ask if I met you during a holiday and I said, are cryptocurrencies still the ideal support for a cyber criminal? Before I answer your question, I would say that the way you can use crypto assets in a legal way. We have capitalization for decentralized financial assets, more than 200 billion US dollars. So it's a legal support. But some experts say that 1% of this money stemming from an illegal source. So the first false idea that I'd like to fight here is that crypto assets equals crime, not necessarily, far from it. And a number of states, a number of governments have chosen cryptocurrencies as national currency. So there are many, many legal uses of crypto assets. So why criminals in general, and not just cyber criminals, are using crypto assets? Why do they prefer transactions on the blockchain? Well, probably for the same reasons as legal actors or legal operators. What they want is traceability among themselves. In the crime ecosystem, you need to trust someone, and usually criminals are not people that you would trust naturally. So the blockchain is a way for them to track, to have full traceability when they do a financial transaction, because their financial transactions are often in millions. The second advantage of the blockchain, of this decentralized monetization, is that it is precisely decentralized. So there's no control by a state authority, by a central authority, and in the fight against money laundering, this decentralization can really be a hurdle for public authorities, and it's an asset for criminals. And also, this decentralization calls for cross-border activities, and very often crime is cross-border. And the fact that you have an asset that is valuable and exchangeable everywhere in the world is a main advantage for criminal transactions. Also, to add to that, I can talk about the infrastructure on the operator's side. Most criminal activities are looking at making their transactions and activities as opaque as possible. And the fact that you have operators operating in crypto assets not compliant with governments is really important for criminals. Because local authorities, public authorities asking for information will get no information. It's really adding to the opaqueness of the transactions. Geopolitically, it's very interesting to see where the blockchain is supported. It's really a way for us to spot a number of trends in the ecosystem, in the criminal ecosystem. Do you do that mapping? Do you do the mapping over the different continents? Well, one of the strategies of the police is to identify those infrastructures, the point being to dismantle infrastructures, to do away with the service. I mean, servers, mixers, exchanges, and very often we are indeed looking at servers. We have to locate them. The police needs to know where the servers are, and then they can seize the data that they need. Servers are a really good example because you need a physical, a face-to-face contact with an operator. You need to go to a country, and you also need the authorization of operators. Police forces have to get the green light to seize a server. We also try and be discreet. We always try and hide our intentions. So really, the compliance of the operator is fundamental for us. Also fundamental is international cooperation, because crime is borderless. So police services, investigators, local authority, legal authorities have to cooperate. We have to have criminal international cooperation. And in a second step, we also need international sharing of data. Illegal actors have no borders, so they're going to work on pretty much every continent simultaneously. So if one police service in a country can share information with colleagues abroad, this is really helping the fight against crime, and it's helping us solve a number of crime. We will come back to this because we've seen some major police action against mixers, for example. When I go to a forum, a darknet platform, or a cybercrime site, often they suggest that you pay in cryptocurrency. How does that work? Is it something that has always been there? Is it really the choice of transaction for criminals? What can we say about crypto assets? Yes, they're particularly valuable. I was telling you about the main advantages a minute ago. You need to understand the general background of cybercrime. I want to talk about it globally. We're talking in a criminal and capitalistic system. This is what you need to bear in mind. Those criminals act just as legal actors. They have commercial activities, but to carry out their activities, they need operators. They need financial operators for financial transactions. They need mobility. physical mobility of a number of illegal products on the dark net, for example. And also when you buy an illegal substance, drugs, for example, or weapons, or products, images, tokens. There are many products that can be exchanged. So crypto assets are really fashionable, not just for high-level crime networks, but also in daily petty crime, for example, for drug trafficking. A number of users pay for their drugs with crypto assets, and they're not buying kilograms. You can pay for a few grams over the internet. It's used very widely. To have a global vision, what are the main usage of cryptocurrencies for criminals? The first one, it's payment, with many advantages that I've mentioned already. We saw it recently. For ransom, for example, one of the founding fathers of Ledger was kidnapped, and the ransom was paid in crypto assets. So we see that even physically, those crypto assets are being used. When you have a cyber attack, they're constantly used. I'm talking about ransomware. Systematically, it has to be paid for by a cryptocurrency with the whole ecosystem behind, because once you have in place the payment of the ransom, you need to have a number of functionalities. You have people who lend their identities, who lend their wallets to have the illegal monies proceed through their wallet. And there's a whole network of money launderers where the money will go through different mixes or exchanges, so that at the end, the money is used to buy real estate or to pay other actors of the crime ecosystem. It's also used for the selling and purchasing of data. Again, cybercrime. If you steal data, you know, data is really key for many crime networks. Data are very expensive to buy because they're used to feed into other criminal activities. And again, the main means of payment is through crypto assets. Second example of use for crypto assets, it's a source of revenues via scams. Rather than stealing people through physical scams, the scams are done over the internet using cryptocurrencies. And we're seeing today a phenomenon, the wallet emptier, operations that try and get into your wallet with the victim participating in the theft. When they sign a transaction with a smart contract, they open their wallet, they give way to their information and data, and hence the victim participates in the stealing of the money. And the third example of use, laundering, which is maybe one of the key points that we need to mention, not just for cybercrime, but for crime in general. Currently in France, we have a debate in the parliament on narco trafficking, and they talk about the way cryptocurrencies are used for laundering the proceeds of illegal trafficking. You talked about Moneron. There are other assets that allow a level of anonymity. The point being to make the transactions as unreadable, as opaque as possible. We also have mixers. Mixers are infrastructures that make your transactions really unreadable, mixing values, mixing flows, and jumping from one blockchain to another, always to put as many hurdles as possible between the criminals and enforcement authorities, trying to disguise their operations and making the traceability or the investigation work as complex and as complicated as possible. So there's high level of skills needed on the part of investigators. So blockchain is clearly an asset for criminals. But it can also be, for us and for enforcement forces, an obstacle because the technology is hiding a number of transactions and making traceability very difficult to follow. Can you give a very concrete, tangible example? Can you tell us about this, an investigation, as far as you can? We say it's opaque, but on the other hand, the blockchain keeps everything. And sometimes you still manage to find the criminals. So can you give us the example of an investigation that led to an arrest, and what information you can find and how you can find it? Yes, well, it's time for me to come clear. If I have to talk about the recent investigations we made, operations on the blockchains are traceable, but it's not just clicking on a button like it is for commercial solutions and you get the data sheet of the different operators. Our role is to identify the perpetrators of an infraction. The financial investigation is an element of proof of the guilt. So our mission is to define who did what at what stage of the transaction. So really what is most important for us is to have access to the data, to have access to the wallets with the keys. This is a challenge very often to enter into the wallet, to enter the circuit. But once you're in, you need to do away with the anonymity. You need to find a particular perpetrator behind an IP address and not just a device. We need to find a name. So the main share of our job, and then I'll come back to human resources. The one example I can talk about to some extent, was made public in January 23. January 23, we had to dismantle an infrastructure suspected of money laundering, the exchanger, the Bizlato exchanger, an exchanger Russian-Ukrainian based, if memory serves, in Hong Kong. And this mixer was facilitating financial transactions on the blockchain. At the beginning, it was just a chat over Telegram. And then, due to its success, it's scaled up with a flow of several billion euros over 2 or 3 years in activity. This mixer was identified as used by cyber criminals for money laundering purposes through very complex processing, and they were clearly non-compliant. All the requests that were sent to this operator, to this mixer, were turned down. And what we knew about the clients, when they had to disclose the list of clients, they never did so. So with other European enforcement forces under the lead of the French Gendarmerie, it was international cooperation. We learned a lot from a technical point of view, from a legal point of view, and also in terms of police work, because we got a better understanding of the crime economy. The general idea was to really look at the circuit of laundering, money laundering, look at how they used the information systems, the toolkit, the crime toolkit, the IT experts. So we used this investigation to really understand how those different skills converge, and it got us a lot of information to try and help and identify the perpetrators of a given crime. We also looked at the different investigations in progress in countries of the European Union and elsewhere to see if an IP address or a wallet address or any other technical data could help solve a national investigation regarding other illegal activities. So this mixer was identified. So there was a lot of legwork to be done very discreetly under the radar to look at the digital environment of the company, the legal environment, the financial environment before we could carry out more detailed investigations. And then international cooperation kicked in. Of course, the perpetrators were not French residents and they were working internationally. Legally speaking, it's an operation that was led by the G3, the French branch of fight against organized crime, and very quickly we scaled it up to the European level. Once the preparation legwork done, once a number of investigators were sent to the US, to Spain, to Portugal, but also to Cyprus, we launched this international operation mid-January 2023. It was a two-step operation. First, technical operation, where we had to collect data on the servers that were found in the mixer. This technical operation on the servers was paralleled with a seizure operation, the freezing of bank accounts, financial accounts, because the money had an illegal origin. We asked the owners to show that their funds were legal, so we were able to freeze assets, more than 15 million equivalent euros in crypto assets that we had frozen on the accounts of the mixer. And then a second step in the investigation, once we had the data, once we had frozen the financial assets, we arrested the top management over in different places in Europe, in the south of Europe, and in the US. Then they were sent to France, and they're currently in prison in France, and they're being regularly interrogated by the judges in charge of the case. Now, in terms of methodology, we rely on reports published by private partners which know the crypto world really well. They talk about the nature of flows. They try and assess the amount of flows that can be either seen as legal or illegal. So again, we need to work and cooperate with private actors. We work with our European colleagues, we share information, but we also share technological know-how. This operation was the first that was done at such a large scale, and one of the main challenges for us is always data management. We have dozens of terabytes of data, very often enciphered, so we have to decipher, we have to deal, process, make it understandable so that investigators can make a link between several cases. And we really want to make it understandable for the people working in enforcement. So we have to constantly develop, come up with software solutions that help us process digital data, so IP address, wallet address, passwords, so really legwork. We also had to define a new job description for an investigator working in financial transactions, but in crypto assets, also able to work with complex data. Do you train them? Do you train the investigators? Yes, we do train investigators. We have specialized investigators specialized in detecting transactions on the blockchain. We call them fintech investigators. And then there's a second level, investigators who can trace transactions on the blockchain, working on demixing. The training is done here in Lille, in a center operated by the Gendarmerie. So there's a fintech unit within the Gendarmerie. Well, the department I lead is one example, but in every region in France, we have more than 300 investigators, fintech level 1 and 2. So it's now a skill that you find everywhere in France. Police also has investigators, fintech investigators, but beyond the number of investigators, it's a very specific job. You need to be interested by the digital world. You need to understand about financial transactions. So you need to find people who want to do investigation on the blockchain, and they need to understand the financial and digital ecosystem. So really, we have to identify the talents to train them so that we get investigators with the necessary skill. Now, investigators are one link of the chain, but we also need trained magistrates. And we have a number of magistrates that come and train in our center, FinTech Level 1, because they need to really be explained what's the environment in which they work. What I also remember as a journalist is that you can trace back, you can arrest, you can close down a mixer, you can stop cybercrime through your skills. We have the time for a couple of questions if you have one. It's always difficult to go first. The question is not being spoken in a microphone, sorry. It's a question on mixers. What is the legal existence of a mixer? Well, it's to go from one asset to another. So mixers can have a legal purpose. Some investors have to change their support. The illegal aspect is more in using the opacity for money laundering purposes, for example. So mixers are legal. I have the text of, I think, by the way, that the Bill of Law on narco trafficking wants to talk about more prerequisite for mixer, for example, a list of clients. But really, as a wider number of operators are becoming more secure, there will be other badly intended people, but there is some pressure put on the mixers so as to enhance their legal purpose. And we have a number of success stories. They may seem very few, but we have success stories, and every time we have a success story, we capitalize on it in terms of enforcement and technical learning. Now, investigation, we work on examples, on cases of use. We also have within our center, the INCYBER, a group of civil experts in crypto assets, and they do a lot of monitoring, they do a lot of surveillance, and they just call our attention to new modus operandi. They talk about potential targets, and this monitoring is also done by a number of magistrates that can then call upon investigating forces in France. Just on your question, at the European level, how is the international cooperation done? Well, we have legal interfaces such as Europol. You all know about Europol. Eurojust, which is the legal equivalent. And just to give you an example, in May, next month, we're going to facilitate a workshop over 1 week with some 30 invited countries to talk about decentralized finance, to talk about our fintech capacities, to talk about our skills, have sharing of good examples, but also share our concerns. I mean, looking at the level of skills needed, at the technicity needed, of course, the more united we are, the stronger. Every time we can work together, time we can work internationally, it makes sense, because crime knows no border. It would make no sense to work nationally, to work in silos, because we're faced with international flows of money over the blockchain.
Alors, je dirais la différence majeure, c'est la nature de la donnée, c'est la donnée numérique.
Well, really, it's the data that makes the difference. Digital data is quite different from physical data, so it requires a specific know-how. I'm not saying the investigator is better. I don't know what the right word is, but what I see is that the work of the detective or the investigator is quite different. When you work in traditional finance, you often get bank accounts in PDF format, for example. And now, if you work on the blockchain, it's a more active role on the part of the investigator. There's one key quality we look for in our investigators. It's common sense. You have to go beyond appearances, and we try and work as much as possible in groups of two to try and avoid human error as much as possible. Something else that has changed over time, we have to develop new tools to process mass data, mass digital data. And having worked with a number of investigators working on traditional finance and now on decentralized finance, of course they need the same skills, but the fintech investigator has to be digitally literate, which is not always the case in the enforcement forces. Next point on the Excellence Center that I lead, you also need investigators that are able to work with technical services. We have to develop a number of solutions on the blockchain, on smart contracts. We need to work on our capacity to process data. I'll give you a recent example. We currently looking at the theft of a number of crypto assets. We have seized a number of smartphones, each of them between 1 and 2 terabytes. We have to very quickly get the keys, very quickly follow the money, otherwise we have nothing to show for our efforts. So we really have to work in synergy between the investigators and the world of digital finance to very quickly develop the app we need to get the right photos, to look at elements in a message service that look like a keyword, that look like a key, so that we can get to the monies before they're gone. So we really have to work together, the investigation, the technical know-how, and the one major interface is data management. We had another case recently where we created unheard of cooperation between those 3 skills that we were able to associate to get to a result overnight. So we constantly have to develop new strategies, and the knowledge of the digital world, the understanding of the digital environment is key. So we see the emergence of new jobs, we see the emergence of new synergies. And I would say that to the contrary to what we can do in terms of traditional finance, we have to act very quickly. We have to be extremely reactive because assets can move extremely quickly. And talking about that recent operation, what we did before we launched any action, we worked on our targets. We really looked in details. We looked at their digital lives, which apps they would use on a daily basis, because for 10 people that we arrested, we had 100 smartphones. So you see the capacity we need to have in terms of capacity processing. Very interesting, but I'm very sorry. We have to stop here. You can turn to Colonel Manet if you have further questions outside of the room, and we need to make room for the next conference. Thank you.